Okay, we're rolling.
All right, this is an interview at the Barker Library, Fredonia, New York. It is the 9th of November, 2005, approximately 9:30 a.m. Interviewers are Wayne Clark and Mike Russert. Could you give me your full name, date of birth, and place of birth, please?
Robert Moyer, Tadt, date of birth 14th November 1931, and I was born right here in Fredonia.
Okay. What was your educational background prior to entering service?
I went through high school, and right after high school I went about 5 to 6 months in Fredonia College, and it was an elementary course. It wasn't anything special, but it was just to priming you up for later, and I decided I didn't like it, so I got a job right over here at the bank and was head bookkeeper before I went into service. When I got drafted, that ended that.
Okay, that was my next question. So you were drafted
Yep.
into the Army. Where did you enter service and when?
I went into service on the 24th of July, 1952 at Buffalo recruiting station there. And from there I went to Fort Devens the same day, Fort Devens, Massachusetts. And from there they shipped me to Fort Knox, Kentucky, which I spent 8 weeks in basic training and 8 weeks in clerk typist school, because they knew I was at a bank, so they thought I could handle that. And after that, I got my orders for Korea. I came home. Oh, I had a 10-day leave, and about the 30th of December, I had to go to, I had to go to Pittsburgh, get on the airport, on the airplane, and go to Fort Lawton, Seattle. I was there 3 or 4 days over the New Year's Day, and that was just a stopping off place. I didn't have any duties or anything to pull. After Fort Lawton, we got on the boat, General Ballou, and it was a rebuilt French boat. There were 5,000 plus GIs on it, and the bunk was about 18 inches high. You felt like you were in a drawer. To get out of it, you had to get out sideways, of course. And I was right next to an air conditioning pipe and got an ear infection, which didn't make me too happy, but we had diarrhea on the boat because their dishwashing machine was not washing, getting soap out. And we spent 18, 19 days on the ocean. The first night we had hit a nice big storm out of Seattle, Puget Sound. And we had 6 roll calls that night. They knew somebody fell overboard, but they didn't know who. And so we kept having roll call, roll call, roll call. So we didn't get any sleep that night, but we got to Japan.
Someone did get swept overboard?
Yeah, it was whether they tried to decide whether the guy jumped or whether he was, the waves did it. And after everybody got diarrhea on the boat, we had quite a few experiences that way. We got to Japan, it was either 18 or 19 days after that, so it had to be the latter part of January 1953. We stayed 2 days at Tokyo, at the base there. And then we saw a little bit of Japan, but we didn't get off the base. We got back on the same, we called it the tub, and went through the Sea of Japan to Korea. I think that was a 2-day trip. I'm not sure just how long, but it wasn't that long. And we got to Busan and took the Tunaville trolley, we called it, all the way up to Seoul, up to Yeongdeung-po, which is between the Han River and Seoul. And we were in a repel-depel. We didn't know where we were going or anything about it, but when our orders were cut, the first night there, we had tents, of course, and there were 12 of us in the tent. They had a lack of fuel oil for the stove, and so the stove went out during the night. And learning in basic training that if it was real cold, you could put your field jacket around your feet and kind of keep warm. Out of the 12 that were in the tent, 7 went home the next morning, went back to the States with frostbite. I was fortunate enough to, well, I don't know if it was fortunate, but I wrapped the field jacket around my feet and came through it okay.
Now, did you have much winter equipment at all, or?
No, we were
Overcoats
lacking, and that was one of the reasons. I think I had 2 army blankets and my wool uniform. Slept, of course, in the uniform because it was so darn cold. It was 35 degrees below zero, and we just weren't used to it. The 2 days later, I got my orders cut to go to 8th Army Headquarters, the Casualty Section, which was an old burned out school building up on a hill. I guess you'd call it a mountain maybe. And our transportation, we could get a Jeep, but you had to call in quite a lot ahead of time. And we had a Jeep assigned to the section because it was a message center, casualty section, I mean. I got to be pretty darn homesick, and that's only natural, I guess.
Was this the first real time you were away from home?
Oh yeah. I'd never been away from home more than a week prior to that time. And this casualty section building was, like I said, a burned out building, but they had revamped it a little bit. And one of the nicest things that ever happened there was one day as I was typing up some casualty reports, I had to send the letters back to the States to the mothers and families that their son was wounded or killed or what have you. Of course, in there I had to put a few little lies, but nobody's going to write home and tell them anything negative to the parents. It was about, I guess, a week after I got there. We were in tents. I looked down at the radiator in that building, and the valve on the radiator said Marsh Valve Company, Dunkirk, New York. And that was within 2 miles of us now. And that was nice. That made me feel at home. We kept on casualty reporting, and finally we had to go up to Moonsonee, up to Panmunjom, where they were repatriating the prisoners from all countries. And that was kind of an inspiring thing. They had, well, there was 10 of us in the truck, and we got sniper fire from up on a hill.
Now, was that the first time you were ever under fire, or were you under fire previously?
Well, on the Tunaville Trolley going up to Seoul, we were fired at several times, which was small arms fire. But nobody got hurt on that one, thank goodness. On the way to Moonsonee, I had a Afro-American on this side of me and an Afro-American on this side of me. This guy had 3 kids. This guy had 2. I wasn't married, of course. And this guy got shot through the shoulder. This guy got it in the head, both of them, which kind of upset the apple cart. We weren't quite used to that. In order to get away from the sniper fire, we didn't know where it came from or anything. I yelled to the guys to get under the truck. I jumped out of the truck, and we got under the truck. Got away from the sniper fire. And the next thing that happened was I had a little problem walking, but I didn't think too much about it then. We, up at Moonsonee, when we were taking reports and things, this was prior to the signing of the treaty or whatever they want to call it. We were getting everything ready for the big switch. And, well, the next day after that incident, I couldn't get out of my bunk. I was back in Seoul. So a couple of the guys helped me over to the 121st Evac Hospital. They put a heating pad on my knee. They put some patches, bandage, I guess you'd call it an ace bandage, and gave me a pair of crutches, which I had for 2 to 3 months. Like I said, I had to go to General Taylor's bunker and take all the messages that came through, and he had to sign for a lot of them, so he and I became pretty good friends. But in Korea, you never made real good friends, because the next day they might not be there, or you might not be there. So General Taylor wanted to know if I wanted to go to Japan and recruit, and in the back of my mind there was a lot of so-called chicken in Japan, because they were out of the war zone. And I said, no, I'd stick it out in Korea. We had no trouble at all getting rides. Every Army vehicle that went by would offer you a ride, you know. And 2 or 3 of us would go on a camera trip around the city. This one day, 3 of us were looking for the Doksu Palace, which was built by the Japanese. Very nice Asian architect. And we were lost. We came upon this guy that was well-dressed Korean man. We tried to talk to him in Korean, but we didn't know much of it. And finally I burst out and says, "Do you speak English?" And the guy says, "No, I teach it at the University of Seoul." So there we were, four of us went out laughing at each other. We were on that mountain. We had to get to Seoul PX somehow. We found a shortcut through this little settlement of Korean houses, nothing more than a cow path, so to speak. And we knew it was off limits, but it was saved about 3 miles of walking, so we would take that. And there was off limit signs all over the place, but we still took that. And one day there were 2 MPs that were there. They yelled at us and started chasing us. Well, we knew the path and we knew the rice paddies, and we led them down the path where the rice paddies, the honey buckets were poured into holes in the ground. And they chased us, and not looking back, but we heard a splat, splat, and 2 MPs hit the honey buckets. We kept on running, but that didn't stop us from taking the shortcut. In Seoul, you had to watch yourself awfully careful. This was in 1953, like in February and March, and well, through the whole year. Korean kids would come up with a pair of shears. They'd cut the strap on your camera or on your carbine, and it would go running down the street. So I bought a .45 pistol and kept that strapped on all the time I went to the city. And they didn't bother you because they knew if they took the rifle, they'd have something else coming. And that worked out good. I became old man of the company up on the hill. A lot of the guys were sent home, a lot of the guys were killed. The lieutenant colonel, that was light colonel we called him, that was the head of our company up there, asked me if I would tell all the guys that came over from the States, kind of give them an orientation on to what to expect and how to survive. And so I had my little sessions with the new members of the company. All of a sudden, the company was to be moved to 8th Army Headquarters, which was the other side of Seoul from where we were. And we jumped up a notch. We had metal Quonset barracks. Weren't too warm, but they were better than the tents. And big parade field over there. That's where the 121st Evac Hospital was. We had all kinds of little things happen, like the warrant officer that was in charge of the mess hall had a deal with the Koreans and sold out Thanksgiving turkeys. We had rice. As a matter of fact, we had rice for 26 meals. Just rice pudding, rice cake, you name it. And I guess they caught up with a warrant officer, and he come back to the States, I guess, I don't know. But we had several little incidents, the Koreans stealing stuff. The Korean kids would get mad if they were fired as houseboys, and one threw about about 6 bars of GI soap into our Lister bags. Quite a few of us got yellow jaundice. Your eyeballs ever turn yellow? Mine did. They said it wasn't, it's hepatitis, but they said it wasn't too serious, but it gave you a funny feeling. We were kind of confined to barracks for 3-4 days. Following my experience on the crutches, we had a Korean man that worked at the mess halls, and every night he'd take home the crating, the cardboard, part of the pallets, anything that would burn to heat his little shack, because they'd get 35 below, you know. The MPs at the gate were sure the guy was stealing something, but they didn't know what it was, and they'd look through that wheelbarrow with a fine-tooth comb. After that, they didn't find anything, so he wheeled on home. It was all right until the end of the month when the quartermaster took inventory and he was 19 wheelbarrows short. He wasn't too dumb, I don't think. But we learned a lot about foreign countries, and we didn't exactly feel that we'd want to live there. The Korean kids would follow us down by the little streams, and we'd shoot rats. Now, the rats weren't, well, they're the size of our cats. They were really made out good. We would shoot the rats, and the kids would come along, pick them up, take them home, and cook them. That made us appreciate the U.S. Many times, the South Koreans didn't want the U.S. to sign any treaties. They didn't want any end of the conflict. We would be driving through Seoul, delivering these messages and stuff, and a bunch of them would get in front of the Jeep. A bunch of them would get to the side of the Jeep and try to tip it over. And several times we had to fire our carbines up in the air to scare them off. Nobody got shot or anything like that, but sometimes they were pretty rough scaring. We were going along. They had a big circle where 4 or 5 streets came into right near the President Ree's palace, and the trucks going out after invalid tanks and heavy equipment, bringing them back to Seoul, had to come down the mountain and go around this circle. We were by the circle one day, and the truck carrying a tank came down the hill. The guy lost his brakes, and he tried to make the circle and tipped the tank and the truck over on its side. We were 12 or 14 feet away, and it wasn't too nice. But I'm here. When we moved to the new compound and we had to go to General Taylor's bunker, quite often the MP Jeeps would chase us because we broke the speed limit. We had to break the speed limit because the messages were timed, and if somewhere along the line there was a delay in the teletype from the president, we had to try to make up some of that delay. Well, this one day, a bird colonel in an MP Jeep put on his lights, and we pulled over, And I explained to him, I said, would you please follow us? I got a time message for General Taylor. And I think he thought I was kidding because he delayed us a few minutes. He finally followed us, got to the bunker. He wanted to make sure I wasn't giving him a line. And the general came along and says, what was the delay, Sergeant? I think I was 3 minutes late. And I said, well, out there's a bird colonel that chased us in a MP Jeep, and I said, I couldn't run from him, I had to stop. And we had Korean drivers. Well, the general says, you listen, Sergeant. So I listened. And I never heard anybody get chewed out as much as that doggone bird colonel. He was in his steps. The general told him, he says, next time you see this Jeep, don't chase him, run escort. And so be it.
Can I stop here a second? How did you feel about Maxwell Taylor as a person?
As what?
As a person, as a general?
Well, I thought he was a right guy. I mean, he had time to listen to you. He was busy, but he did absorb everything that you said. And like I said, he offered to send me to Japan. And maybe I should have gone, but I couldn't see leaving the guys, and I couldn't see getting acquainted with everything new over there, so it was different. What I admired about the guy was that he wasn't high-hatted. He was down at my level, which was a sergeant, which wasn't very much, but at least he was there. Other guys in that bunker were very reluctant to send the general out. He had to come through some entranceways. They were reluctant to send him out because he was under guard. But he was a man, I'll tell you, I admired him. Everybody in the company either was killed or sent home, and I was there for 19 months plus, and I was known as the old man of the company at 21 years old. The thing that fascinated me most was how those people survived. Some of them were so thin they were a real fence. And the little Korean men had these A-frames they kept on their backs to carry stuff. They'd carry firewood, they'd carry branches of trees, they'd carry anything. And one day we went by this guy sitting there by a wall, and I said, gee whiz, his A-frame sat there and he had a small piano on it. Well, a piano weighed 500-600 pounds. It had to. And that little guy went walking up the street after we helped him get out on his back. He just hobbled up the street, and that was really something, we thought. But they did. They had the will to survive, and they'd been through a lot, I guess.
So you had a fairly good opinion of most of the Korean people?
Most of them, but there were a lot of them that, in order to survive, they had to steal. And they didn't want the GIs to leave because they stole from the GIs. I don't know how many people stateside sent me boxes of clothes and stuff, and said to give to my houseboy. My houseboy was 35 years old at that time. He had 6 children, another one on the way, and his clothes, the kids' clothes were nicely pressed and everything. He ran a little laundry. He and his wife ran a laundry, and they would take our GI clothes, mend them, put the badges on them and everything, and he did a good job. They, most of the time, the boxes came through and some of them would have candy in it and stuff. My mother insisted on sending me razor blades and gum and candy and cookies, which were all appreciated, but I could buy the stuff in Korea cheaper than they could buy it here, plus they had to pay postage on it. But if I turned them down, it gave them a bad feeling, you know. So every day I was in the service, I wrote my folks, and wrote a lot of other people too, but not as often. But I have kept all the letters that I sent home, and my mother kept all the letters that she got from me. So I can tell you, on the 21st of December 1953, I did this. My brother had been building a new house in 1949, and in 1952 and 3, he was finishing off part of it, and he'd write me that they painted the closet, so they did this, so they did that, so I have a real schedule as to what the house was going. Matter of fact, I looked in the letters to find out exactly what day it was that I got wounded, and it said in there, and we had a little code going, my brother and I, that if I got hurt at all, I would tell him I was playing volleyball, and that I twisted my knee playing volleyball. Well, I lied, but I didn't want my folks to know. Well, everybody that was in my unit there went home, but I knew a buddy of mine that I went in the Army with, I went through high school with, I knew he'd eventually get sent to Korea. He was a mechanic, machinist, and so I told the guys in personnel office there, who were my friends, look out for this serial number if you would, and try to get him located nearby so he don't go up to the lines. Well, all of a sudden one day, this guy walks in. He was located 1 block down the street from where I was. And they had a very interesting sign, I thought, that told an awful lot. Above their gate, they had a sign that said, "We have done so much with so little for so long that now we can do practically anything with nothing." And I thought that told a big story, you know, because we were lacking an awful lot of things that we should have had. But
For example, what do you think you were lacking?
in the tents up on the hill, we lacked fuel oil. In we should have had more blankets, but they're just, whether they got hung up along the way, we don't know. We had good protection, we had a fence around the place and everything, but we shot down one of those bed check Charlies. They had North Koreans would send an airplane down to a motor about the size of a washing machine or whatever, I guess. excuse me, and they would have to fly very low, almost hitting the mountain, because they had to get under the radar. And the radar screen was right up there. One night we got sick and tired of them trying to bomb the Han River Bridge, and they had to go over our compound to get to the Han River Bridge. And I told the guys, hey, when Chuck Charlie comes along, let's shoot him down. Not thinking that we could do it. But we all got out there when the siren went off, and all you had to do was fire just a little bit ahead of where the exhaust flames were coming out. And we got them. The plane went over the hill and blew up because they had the bomb on it. But I don't know how many shots we fired, but you get 10, 12 guys, you can put on quite a spread, you know. The only other thing was that during this repatriation, we had to go back and forth to Seoul quite a lot in these trucks, and invariably there'd be some kind of a sniper, and he would try to hit the trucks. But at the end of our reign of terror at the 8th Army headquarters, we had it a lot better than a lot of guys had it. But still, just being there wasn't the best thing in the world, I didn't think.
How about the food? What kind of food did you have? Did you have hot meals, or did you have to?
We got quite a few C rations and K rations. But on the whole, if the food was bad at the mess hall, the guys would come back and tell us, and we'd go to the PX and get a 15-cent hamburger. It was survival of the fittest, you know.
Did you eat much local food?
No way. We were warned against it because you didn't know if it was tainted or not. They had what they call kimchi, and my houseboy would eat kimchi, and for 4 days he wouldn't be near us. Cabbage and fish heads and rice, and I don't know what else they put in it, but whew, it was beyond help.
Did you see any USO shows or any sort of entertainment like that?
The best entertainment was once in a great while there'd be some celebrity. Terry Moore came over. I was so far from the stage that you couldn't tell it was her or President Roosevelt, you know.
How did you mentioned before about the black soldiers with you. This is the first time the Army was integrated. How did you get along pretty well, raise the relations within the units?
I had no problem with the black soldiers. I had no problem thinking the way they were thinking, but the only problem was that you felt a little uncomfortable, but not that much. I mean, we just took it on the chin. They didn't want to be there, and we didn't either. But I felt awful bad. I had to write the letters home to those parents of the 2 guys that got killed on the truck, and he died in the line of duty, doing his job, and you didn't put in too many of the specifications on the thing, but on the same token, one of my high school buddies got wounded. When his report came through, that was a lot to take. Matter of fact, his father and my father worked in the post office next door together. So it was, I found that the black soldiers more or less took to the Korean girls more than the white guys did. My biggest trouble was with the doggone Red Cross workers and the people that were attached to the army that were over there. They were there for the money, and they made money. You walked in the main PX, and before you got out of there, maybe you were propositioned 3 or 4 times, which was not
By
my line.
Red Cross workers?
Yeah, Red Cross workers and people associated with the Army doing, well, what do you want to say, liaison work. They were American girls, and they were good to look at, but that's it. I just got feeling uncomfortable about it, was all.
Did you have any feelings when President Eisenhower won the election and decided to end the war?
Yes, I was happy.
Happy about that?
I did not like the idea of buddies getting killed. I did not like the idea of the people stealing from us. But that was the only way they could survive. I mean, gee, you can make a lot of friends by going to the PX and buying 5 candy bars and taking them out to the kids. And some of those kids would come back and day after day. Some of them would get to know you by name. Some of them would wanted to shine your shoes for nothing and all this and that. I wouldn't take any freebies at all, but they sure did get a lot of cameras and a lot of rifles.
When did you leave Korea? When did you leave?
It was in July, about the 10th, I guess, 8th or 10th of July. And I was supposed to be discharged or separated by the 24th. I didn't think I'd make it, but I just made it. As a matter of fact, I had 30-some days coming of leave, and that leave time, they paid me for it, but I never got a chance to take it because I was discharged 23rd or 24th of July, which was 2 years.
This was in 54.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Did you ever use the GI Bill at all when you got home?
When I got home, I went back to the bank where I had been working before I went in the service, and they had hired a man from, east of here. It was down by Saranac Lake somewhere. And he had 5 kids. And I wasn't about to make the bank take me back and fire him or replace him. I knew my rights that I could, but I just didn't have the heart. And I'd always, when I was a kid, I was always building something. Whether it be a wagon I'd remodel, and I built a little salt trailer for the winter time. I drew behind my wagon and had a little trough where the salt would come out of the thing and go on the sidewalks. And I had a shack and all this kind of stuff. And I liked carpentry. I'd done quite a lot of it in my folks' home. So the first month that I was home, I kind of had to have a regrouping period. It just was so much different than the 2 years I spent in the service that I guess you'd call it calming down. And during that time, I put in an application to 3 or 4 places here in Fredonia, but at that time they weren't hiring. So I just kind of took it easy and got back to civilian life. Like I said before, I wanted to get into some trade, and so I went to work for a guy in Dunkirk, Lake Erie Construction Company. We built houses from the hole in the ground up. I learned a lot from him. He had me sign up with the GI Bill for carpentry and masonry, and I went to school troops for it, or there had to be 12 or 15 in our class, and we taught the instructor how to build things. That went on for about a year and a half. The government paid part of my wages, which I was getting $1.25 an hour. That was pretty good for 1954. And I got some from the government every month, but it wasn't a big check at all. It was just, it helped. And I didn't want to go to college. I just knew I wasn't college material. And after that carpentry experience, I worked for another contractor. And the second contractor was kind of a wheeler and dealer, and he pulled a few insurance deals that I didn't think were very good. I went to work for a man here in Fredonia, Mr. Zaloff. He owned a lumber company down on Water Street. And he kind of took me under his wing because he saw that I was interested in the work I was doing. As it ended up, in 1967, I bought a house from my father's estate, and I used it as a warehouse. It was across the street from my place that I built. And during the building of my house, my wife got pregnant. I don't know how, but she got pregnant. Anyway,
I won't ask about that.
no. The strange part of it was nights and Saturdays. I didn't work on Sunday, but nights and Saturdays, I worked on the house. And it took me 2 years. But in the process, she was up on the roof putting shingles on it. And I could not in any way, shape, or matter. I was mad at her. I just didn't want her up on the roof being pregnant like that. I didn't want her to fall anyway, but even at that. And she stood there and she says, "I'm going to have my baby when we moved in this house." And that was it. But we kept on working. I got another carpentry job here in Fredonia, and like I said, the man owned the lumber company, and he was kind of a millionaire. He had horses and everything. He was a heck of a good guy. And he sold the business twice. It came back to him. And finally one day I went by the business and I saw a sign on the door that says, "Gone fishing." Well, I knew he'd retired then, you know. So I approached him and wanted to know what he wanted for the business. And he told me. He said, well, $55,000 was what he was asking. I said, whoops. He said, I'll think about it a few days. And he just walked away from it. It was left many, many materials there that I could use every day of the week. And I finally met him down there, and we looked around the place, and he says, "Can you get together 15,000? I says, "What?" I knew there was like $25,000 worth of materials sitting there ready to be used, plus the buildings and all. And finally, he says, I told him, I got together 13,500. And he said, wonderful. It was an out for him. He could call it a tax loss, all this and that and anything else. And so I took over the business. There wasn't any business there. It was just the buildings and the materials. And it wasn't long after that that he said, hey, I got these warehouses up in Leon, a little burg up here, by the railroad tracks. He says, you want to come up and maybe you can buy some material from me? Well, he had them packed. Good stuff, because he was a smart guy. And he says, how much can you give me for these, for this? I said, well, there was all kinds of stuff. I says, well, how much do you want? He says, well, give me $5,000 and it's yours. And he says, and by the way, he says, I have to pay rent to the railroad for these warehouses. He says, if you want the buildings, you can have them too, for the $5,000. Well, I took down this section of building, all the material down to my mill, and put up a section. Took the lumber out of the next section and put it in the first section. I ended up building a building 196 feet long, 26 feet deep, using one piece of new lumber. Everything else come from those warehouses. Oh, I was a miser. I mean, I used up every scrap, and he was amazed. He come down, he looked at it, and I started my own little paint and hardware store. And I didn't have much money to work with, but I ran the thing for 27 years.
Did you join any veterans organizations?
I joined the Legion here in Fredonia in 1954. My dad had been a Legion member a long time, and he ended up being a 54-year-old member, a 54-year member. And
he was a veteran?
He was a veteran in World War I.
World War I.
My brother was a veteran in World War II, and I was a Korean. And my wife was in the Army in the Korean War, but she didn't get to Korea. She was at Fort Lee, Virginia. And I didn't tell you about my wife and I had known each other all our lives. They lived right around the corner from us. And one day I read in the paper that her brother was in the Air Corps, weathering man, and they got a letter from the government saying that he had contacted something, and another letter 2 hours later that was sent 2 days later from Okinawa that he had died. And at the funeral home, being a friend of mine that I had fished with and slid downhill with and when we were kids, I went to the funeral home, talked to the girl later to be my wife, and that was a hard nut to chew. But they were a good family, and I'm still married to her after 50 years.
How do you think your time in the service changed or had an effect on your life?
Well, it made me grow up from a wild little kid to a big fat devil. I had to put it that way. Other than that, we had the one boy who's now 47. We adopted a boy who's now 43. And we adopted a girl that's now 41. And we're one mixed up family. No. I never regretted any of it. But I think the service made me realize that there were a lot of people in the world that were living off the skin of their teeth. They're just, how can they live this way? How can you eat a rat? I mean, how can you live in a one-room shack and have the heat in the floor that goes? You know how they did it. They built a tunnel out of stone. And it made me appreciate the American way of life a lot more. But like I told the judge the other day when he got me for having a junk vehicle, which is perfectly usable, in my yard. Yeah, I told the judge, I says, hey, I spent 19 months in Korea for you bastards. And I meant every word of it, and he knew I meant it, because he was pretty well shooken up. I mean, you don't tell a judge that, you know. But they did. Other than that, I can't tell you much more, except that every day now that I'm retired, I just, and you know, one thing that's really got me, I'm totally blind in this eye. I'm getting compensated by the Army with this eye because they put an implant in there. I tried, and they give me hearing aids. I've been trying for 4 years to get my monthly allotment raised because of my trick knee. I've had the trick knee ever since 1954. They've got the papers and everything. Even General Taylor made them, when I was in Korea, he made them chase my records down, the medical records. They did not in any way, shape, or matter. They told me in 2000, in 1957, they told me that my records had been caught fire in a warehouse in Georgia. And but what do? So your records are gone, right? Well, the knee was bothering me. It kept bothering me. I kept falling. I didn't dare go across Main Street because if I fell in the street, it would be... So I'd go around the block and get to the side of the street that I wanted to be on. But they keep send more information, send the new information. I bet I have 10 letters at home and a pack of medical reports that high from Buffalo VA Hospital about my knee, about my hepatitis, about my hearing and all the pills and everything that I had to take. They will not acknowledge the fact that the knee was service-connected. And I've got the slip right from the 121st evac. And I don't understand why, because it's information that the Army put down on paper, and the Army won't accept it. So I stand there and I say, what's going on here? I mean, come on now. But I don't know what to think about it. It's just, I was falling 5 and 6 times a day, and I definitely didn't dare go up on a ladder or on scaffolding and stuff, and so I had to quit carpentry. I'd love to be right out there now putting a roof on or something, but it's not in the books, you know. Sandy, she's helped out a lot. I mean, I wake up in the night yelling, get under the truck. That don't help any. My wife kicked me out of the bed 5 years ago because I kept her awake. But I don't know, everybody's got their little ifs, ands, and buts, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
It's one of those stupid things. I don't know. I've got the VA in Dunkirk trying to help me on the thing, but send more new material. He said, send more information.